Good morning to you. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is fun. This was sort of like when new wave was emerging, and that kind of touches punk and it touches this and that. Where do the Talking Heads fit in? Their music is so quirky, it's kind of hard to figure out where it fits.
Well, that was part of the appeal of it, I think. They began in a club, of course, CBGB's in New York, which had a reputation as a punk club, punk rock club, but Talking Heads from the very beginning were something quite different. They were much stranger. They were much, as you say, quirkier in that sense. But they essentially cut their own direction in music.
I just saw David Byrne recently. This is, gosh, it's 50-year anniversary of the band. I think he joined Olivia Rodrigo on stage recently, who's a young, it's interesting how this generation appreciates what the Talking Heads did.
Absolutely. I was very grateful for them for inadvertently doing a commercial for my book. The song that they did is the title of my book. And of course, it's one of their greatest songs, one of their greatest records, which is the main reason that we picked it to advertise the book in that way.
And one might wonder, Stop Making Sense had something to do with the name Talking Heads, which is a reference to television, but it's my understanding it wasn't about what we're saying, at least in the 80s. It was about emotion. What did they mean by all that?
Well, David Byrne had what I've described as an agnostic attitude about many of the themes of popular music, beginning with romantic love. And as I say, he came at this from a very unique, very original direction as a songwriter. And the band supported him with a very unusual, sort of diverse type of musical backing. And the combination was utterly distinctive.
And his performance style is so unusual. I didn't realize David Byrne has Asperger's syndrome.
Yes, well, he sort of acknowledged this, or let's put it this way, he discovered this because, of course, when he was growing up and when we first became aware of him, there was no awareness of Asperger's syndrome.
Right.
David spoke about it in the early 2000s, I think, for the first time. And what I'm mainly interested, what interests me about that aspect of him is not so much its effect on his personal relationships, but mainly its effect on his creative sensibility. Some people with Asperger's have extraordinary powers of concentration and observation. And when you put that together with a great deal of artistic self-discipline, it's a great prescription for an unusual viewpoint on the world. And of course, one of the things that David is certainly known for is his unusual viewpoint on things that are quite familiar to all of us.
I don't know all the details, but I know the band broke up. I don't think they were talking for a while. And with this revelation of Asperger's, are the other members of the band more sympathetic to David Byrne? Has that done any healing or anything?
It's not for me to say. I mean, that's all between them. I think that the relations between them have improved in the last few years. Of course, they came together and to promote the re-release of Stop Making Sense last year. And I don't think the question everybody asks me in the wake of that is whether there's any chance they're going to get back together. And the answer to that, I can fairly confidently predict is no. That's not going to happen. They've all moved on in their various ways, David in particular. But it was nice to see them making nice with one another. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
For people who aren't familiar, if younger people are coming up, they might hear a song or two they like. But what was about this band? There's lots of bands that come and go. What really did they do that was so unique that's worth writing a book about for those who aren't familiar with them?
I would say they became, if the Beatles were the archetype of the first generation rock band, there's a way that Talking Heads were the archetype of the second generation rock band, what we've come to call alternative rock nowadays. That is to say, they were aware of the history of the music, and aware of a need to have a real evolution in what they did. Each record, each album that they put out was different from the one before it. And while the Beatles sort of set that pattern, and a number of other groups have adhered to it, it's not all that common in popular music. So what you're seeing with them is a real, let's say, arc of musical development. And that's a fascinating thing. That's a story. That's a narrative. That's something that catches people's imagination. And I think that's had something to do with the fact that they're still listened to and still acknowledged as one of the most important bands of their time.
Well, the book is Burning Down the House, Talking Heads, and the New York Scene that transformed rock. For more, you can check out JonathanGouldAuthor.com. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.